Hello and welcome to another poetry annotation. So we are looking today at Remains by Simon Armitage. So a little bit of information about Simon Armitage because we always should include a little bit of context within our answers. So Simon is an English poet, playwright, musician and novelist. He's actually the current Poet Laureate and was assigned in 2019. Simon's poetry is known for his colloquial style, so informal style, and writing about relatable situations. He mostly uses monologue form, so he will write in a dramatic monologue. Remains, so this poem that we're speaking about today, was actually written for the Not Dead, a documentary about the impact of war on soldiers returning home and also raising awareness about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. The poem and documentary followed ex-serviceman Guardsman Tromans who fought in Iraq in 2003 and suffered himself from PTSD. So Armitage is really, trying to create awareness for this for ex-soldiers who were not receiving the help that they should have received. Okay, so starting off with the poem, the themes of this poem are the psychological impact of war, guilt, conflict, the dehumanisation of soldiers, and like we said before, the structure. This is written as a dramatic monologue. It has a conversational tone and it can almost come across like a confession. It's 8 stanzas long. There's some enjambment, which we will go into, and there's no regular rhyme scheme, which also goes along with the fact that this is conversational, this is natural speech. Okay, so starting with the title, Remains. So this could be reference to injured bodies, what remains. It's quite graphic as the poem is, but also maybe what remains of sanity after being at war and dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. So starting with stanza 1. On another occasion. So the poem begins in media res, in the middle of the action. Soldiers were confused and often launched into action, and many of them quite young as well. We get sent out to tackle looters raiding a bank, and one of them legs it up the road, probably armed, possibly not. So we get sent out. You've got the collective pronoun we. He is representative of other soldiers. They lose their individuality. They are collective. Get sent following orders. So, blind obedience from higher powers. And then legs-it is quite colloquial as well, as we said before. You've got possibly armed, probably armed, possibly not. And you see this line later on as well. And it just shows the decisions that soldiers had to make with very little evidence and then have to deal with the consequences. Okay, stanza 2. Well, myself and somebody else are all of the same mind. So all three of us open fire. 3 of a kind all letting fly, and I swear. And then we would go on. You got enjambment here, which would then take you on to the next stanza. And this actually hastens the pace, showing the rapid motion of the bullets as they are opening fire. The repetition of somebody else and somebody else here, and then you've got the collective pronouns all. It's like the soldier wants to alleviate his own guilt by including others. This wasn't his decision and they all did it. It's not just him. And again, the 3 of a kind is a metaphor. The soldiers have lost their individuality after prolonged warfare and they're actually all conditioned to violence. And, this is second nature to them now. Stanza 3. I see every round as it rips through his life. I see broad daylight on the other side. So we've hit this looter a dozen times and he's there on the ground, sort of inside out. So round and ripped through his life. It's very brutal imagery, and the metaphor shows that the death was instant as it ripped through his life. You've got the harsh consonant R sound showing ruthlessness of the situation. I see broad daylight on the other side. Again, very graphic, violent, showing the brutality of what they are enduring. And then you've got the colloquial language again. So with sort of inside out, it's actually just showing how he's become desensitized to death and violence. Pain itself, the image of agony. One of my mates goes by and tosses his guts back into his body. Then he's carted off in the back of a lorry. So though that first line there is quite emotional, you've got emotive language. So we actually do, flip between emotive language and desensitized language, showing that he's actually struggling with the two. He's reminded of the pain and the emotions of war. And then you've got the one of my mates here, which is quite friendly and shows a social aspect of war that actually probably kept them sane. They had each other, and it was one of the only things that made them feel any sort of comfort while in these dangerous situations. The verbs tosses and carted show a lack of care for the man's body. He's been objectified. The soldiers have actually lost respect for life, and particularly enemy life. Stanza 5. End of story, except not really. His blood shadow stays on the street, and out on patrol I walk over it week after week. Then I'm home on leave, but I blink. So this is the Volta. So this is where there's a change in a poem, and there's a shift in focus. The situation with the looter has finished. However, the memory will not leave his mind, and this is the beginning of the PTSD. The metaphor here about the blood shadows staying on the street can be metaphorically comparing the situation staying in his mind and his not being able to exclude that from his mind. He is reliving it all of the time, and the guilt is staying with him. You have a caesura here, then I'm home on leave, and you have that full stop, and that should create some finality as the mission has finished. However, the memory will stay and haunt him, which is why it's followed with "but I blink," which then you've got some more enjambment here, which shows that the memory continues into his reality at home. And he bursts again through the door of the bank. Sleep, and he's probably armed, possibly not. Dream, and he's torn apart by a dozen rounds, and the drink and the drugs won't flush him out. So you've got the reality of PTSD here. You've got the reliving the event. The verb bursts shows that the memories are powerful, and maybe the soldier is living his everyday life at home, and then all of a sudden the memory, the guilt will burst into his mind. You've got the repetition here from stanza 1, probably armed, possibly not, which shows that again he's reliving the decision that he made to shoot, and he's also reliving it in his dreams as well. So it's showing that it's really taking over his life. The drink and the drugs won't flush him out. This contextually shows that there was not much support, the reality of the lack of support for ex-soldiers who are suffering from PTSD. Suffering soldiers would often turn to substance abuse to numb their overactive mind. And the verb flush shows that he's trying to evict the man and the situation from his mind. Stanza 7. He's here in my head when I close my eyes, dug in behind enemy lines. not left for dead in some distant sun-sunned, sand-smothered land or 6 feet under in desert sand. There's no escape from PTSD. He struggles to relax and to sleep, and he can still see and feel all of the emotions that he did during war. Dug in behind enemy lines, that's a metaphor referring to the trenches, which are a symbol of war, just showing inescapable trauma, that he is unable to get away from these images, and the emotions attached to his life at war. You've got a sibilance here, which creates a sense of sadness and hopelessness for the looter, for the life of the looter, and, for the life that the soldier is now living post-war. And then we finish here with this, two-line stanza. But near to the knuckle, here and now, his bloody life in my bloody hands. So bloody hands is symbolic of guilt, and those who study Macbeth, the reference to Lady Macbeth, with blood on her hands, and believing that she still had blood on her hands when she was suffering, with madness from guilt of killing King Duncan. Bloody could be double meaning, as it could be slang, a curse word, or it could be reference to the real bloodshed that he was partly responsible for, and shows that he will continue to torment himself. And you've also got the possessive pronoun my, which again shows his guilt, and that he does feel responsible. So, poems that you could compare remains with. You could look at Poppies, and the effects of war are damaging and painful emotionally, as Poppies is about a mother who has, let go of her son, who has gone to join war, and that she feels very nostalgic about his childhood, and, feels quite sad and hopeless that he has left. War Photographer, which shows the prolonged involvement in war desensitizes people. The photographer in the poem, the speaker, has become quite numb to the images and the citizens that he's seeing involved in warfare. And you also have this idea about society, having elements of sadness, but again, just getting on with their daily life, and not really understanding the impact that war is having on people in other countries. And then you've got the charge of the Light Brigade, blind obedience of soldiers, who are being told what to do, despite their own thoughts and feelings, and then having to deal with the devastating consequences of that. Okay, I hope this was useful to you. Thank you very much, and do have a look at my other videos if you would like some more poetry annotations. Thank you very much. Happy revising.